The following program is rated PG-13. Parental supervision is advised.
All right. Let me get my clothes on here and put my pants on. All right. Nobody's naked, right? All right.
Poseidon, the ruler of the seas and all that dwell within them. His rule over the oceans is unquestioned. There are those who serve him with tridents and with infinite knowledge of all things submarine. They are known by many names: coners, weaponeers, the merry men of Sherwood Forest. But by Poseidon himself, they are called the Subvets.
Man battle stations missile for WSRT. Spin up all missiles.
Here. Part of your qualification for command. My last breath of polluted air for the next 65 days. Gonna miss it. I don't trust air I can't see.
I gotta go to college. I gotta.
Danny, this isn't Russia. Is this Russia? This isn't Russia.
Allow me to give you a tiny bit of advice. If you want your own boat someday, the very worst thing you can do is worry about yourself or try to impress me. I can't stand save asses and I won't abide kiss asses. You keep your priorities straight, your mission and your men.
Set condition 1SQ for WSRT, spin up missile 9.
Just 9?
Only 9. Only 9 this week.
Okay. Well, I mean, things are kind of heating up a little bit over there. I mean, the White House is mad at him. I'm not mad at Russia. Are you mad at Russia?
Well, I'm always mad at Russia, but that's another story altogether. And we got other things to get on to today because it's an important day.
Yeah, that was sort of last week. We can't get back on that topic again.
Right.
I'll get all angry.
We are very excited today because we get to welcome in our first official guest to the show and longtime author, leadership guru. Let's just call him that. You like that term? Jon Rennie joins us. Jon is a former submarine officer and a noted author and podcaster on leadership and how, I guess, people can be better leaders. And we will talk some about that. We'll get to that. But I particularly want to talk submarines because that's what we talk about, Jon. So it's good to have you here. Or it's old habit. I have to say this. It's good to have you here, Mr. Rennie.
Yeah, it's good to be here. You can call me Jon.
I'm calling you Jon.
Yeah, that's the one thing I always like when I get back from patrols is like, I just want to hear my first name. I got tired of Mr. Rennie, Lieutenant Rennie. I just want to hear my first name. So, I mean, good to see you guys.
When you were a junior officer, Jon, I mean, did they ever drop the pleasantries back like in reactor engineering at all?
No, it stayed formal. It always stayed formal. And, the only people who would say my first name are people that, were equivalent rank. Or lower, like some of the JOs, we would use our first names, but that's it. So, so it was always weird. Like I get home, my wife would call me Jon for the first time. I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that,
Well, I haven't heard that.
3 months.
Well, sometimes we had some LDOs, the weapons officer type, like an assistant weapons officer. Sometimes they would let us call them first name. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, no, it kind of stayed formal. I don't know.
True story. This is an absolutely true story. Some years ago, I think it was around 2008 or 9, we got a new chief of naval operations. You may remember Admiral Greener, who was at one time the executive officer for USS Michigan. And so I know him as Mr. Greener and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, called him, had him on the radio show. And he has an assistant who's a full bird captain. Danny Gonzalez, I think was his name. And he was just absolutely going on and on about, just call me Danny. Just call me Danny. I'm like, no,
you're always we're not calling you Danny.
I do not
do it.
Those were the good old days. So, Jon, let's start with you. I have not read your entire book. I have read the first couple of chapters and skimmed through some of the rest of it, but I was fascinated by your experience walking down that pier to find USS Tennessee, because I've had a similar experience with Michigan. That is in fact, the episode that I talk about is entitled, "That's a Big Boat." And that's kind of what you saw, isn't it? Tell me about that first day.
It's funny because, when I first showed up to Tennessee, the Navy thought that I was ready. But I would tell you, when I got there, I spent a year going through nuke power school prototype, 3 months at sub school, and then you get orders to the Tennessee. You show up, and it's in dry dock, right? So I show up, sea bag on my shoulder, come around the corner. I'm like, holy crap! And there's like hundreds of people working on the boat, getting it ready for sea. There's welding sparks, there's diesel fumes, there's just noises and people yelling. I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I have no idea what's going on. I mean, I can tell you that I was no way I was ready for that role. I was an ensign. I was an 01. So, I was brilliant at that point. I knew everything. But no, I clearly knew I knew nothing. When I saw that boat for the first time, I said, no way I'm ready for this. And then I was the reactor controls officer when I first showed up, and I go back and I meet the team, right? I meet the reactor controls team, and everyone there is made multiple deployment or patrols. They're all qualified, they're all competent, and I realize that I am the liability on the team. So, and I'm in charge. So that's a strange place to be.
Let me back up just a little bit. How did you get your commission? Are you Academy grad, or did you go to NROTC? What did you do?
I was ROTC. I went to engineering school at Worcester Polytech. I studied mechanical engineering. So, the only reason I studied engineering was to get to the boats. All I wanted to do was be a naval officer on a submarine. So I went to engineering school, ROTC, and then off to the fleet. So
when you walk in there, speaking as an enlisted guy, and I'm a second and a first class petty officer, but speaking as an enlisted guy, we have certain preconceptions about different types of officers. Yes. There's the academy grads, and then there's the college grads, which you would fall into. Now, I'm not going to tell you which one we favor or which one we like more.
I can sort of figure it out.
But when you walk in there as an ensign and you see these, I'm sure you got a master chief, some chiefs, some first class, and of course, as we all know, the geniuses that run everything, the submarine experts, the second class petty officers.
That would be us. Yeah. Yes.
That's us. What goes through your mind as, hey, I'm going to lead these guys? And like you said, I don't know anything. What goes through your mind at that point?
Yeah, it's actually, I talk about it a lot when I do some leadership training, because a lot of young managers and companies find themselves in the same position. So they find themselves working for people that are older and more experienced than they are. So what do? I was 23 years old, right? And my chief had probably been in the Navy as many years as I've been alive, right? So how do you properly lead when you don't have the years of experience, or you don't have the time and service, the qualification? And the thing is, you got to earn that respect. You have to earn it. And, for me, at least, I took a very humble approach, and I did a lot of listening. I spent a lot of time asking questions, listening, and working my butt off to prove that I was capable of being their division officer. But I would say the other thing too is that I wanted to get qualified. I mean, I worked hard to get qualified quickly, so that I could show that I wasn't just wasting oxygen. I was there to help. And the other thing too is there's certain things that only the division officer can do, right? The chief really runs the department, right? But there's certain things that division officer has to make sure gets done, coordinating with the engineer, coordinating with the rest to make sure the maintenance items get done, and make sure that, people are taken care of. So the things that I had to do specifically as the division officer, I made sure I did those things really well. But no, I certainly took a humble approach. I did a lot of listening. I did a lot of observations, and just sort of watched the way people interacted. And then just sort of asked a lot of questions, looked over people's shoulders a lot. But no, I took a pretty humble approach because I realized that I was the liability on the team on day one.
That's what I was just getting ready to think, because you're not exactly the first JO unqualified ensign they've ever had. So, if you do take the humble approach, I mean, they'll carry you with you. I mean, we as submariners, I think we actually respected that. if you wanted to listen and learn, then hey, we're gonna help you out. We're gonna put you in the right place. But I think what he saw, we had an academy grad that come in and thought he was going to tell people to do push-ups if they didn't respect them, and those guys get in trouble real quick. I don't think all academy grads are like that, but yeah, we did have one on the grant that was a mess. We had to calm them down a little bit. A little bit of duct tape and some shenanigans back app, it calms them right down. Sometimes they need to be humbled, but yeah, that's I mean, as far as submarining, that's really the right attitude for anybody. It doesn't matter, what, if you're an officer or not, or enlisted, and check on board. If you come with the right attitude, yeah.
So, in a way, if you could, as an officer, it was really an awkward position because you're unqualified and you have responsibilities, you have authority at that point. It's a really weird position to be in. And so I don't ever want to do that again, but you know what I mean? Cause you're unqualified, right? And so you're running around the boat trying to get qualified. It's funny because there's a picture of me, when I got my dolphins and I was rail thin. I mean, I looked like I hadn't slept in weeks and I hadn't eaten in weeks. And it was true. I hadn't, because I had worked so hard to get qualified that I was sick. I mean, I looked terrible. I mean, my pinning ceremony, we came back. Actually, the Tennessee did the 3,000th Strategic Deterrent Patrol. We came back and had this big ceremony. It was actually really the mark of the end of the Cold War. It's pretty cool to be in that ceremony. Colin Powell was there. Everybody in the chain of command was there. And that was also when I got my dolphins. And the picture of me, my wife pinning my dolphins on me, I'm rail thin. I look like my uniform is 2 sizes too big. And it was just one of those things, like you just lived in this constant state of, I don't know, fear, not fear. I don't know, not the right word, but just like embarrassment that you weren't qualified. It was not there's a tremendous amount of positive peer pressure to get qualified. And I took that to heart and I worked my tail off to get qualified because I did not want to be a liability. I didn't want to be a non-useful body. I wanted to be useful as quick as I could. So I worked really hard to get qualified.
Part of that process is, of course, watch standing quals. So kind of talk to me a little bit about, as an enlisted guy, I know what my qualifications were like. In fact, I still have my qual card.
Oh, wow.
What was your qualification process like? Do you know how it compares to the enlisted qualification part? And what was your first watch station where you finally stood a watch and you went, I'm no longer a nub?
Well, so my first thing I did on my first patrol, I was like, look, I got to do something. And the battery charging lineup officer from the last patrol was more than happy to help me get qualified. So the first thing I officially got qualified to do was the battery charging lineup officer. So that's the guy, as you know, that runs through the boat after your petty officer goes through and lines up all the valves and everything. You go through and you verify everything, which means climbing down the battery compartment and, making sure everything's ready for the charge. And man, I loved that role. And, because it was like, I'm adding some value to this boat. I'm not just, useless. While everybody was sleeping in their racks, I was making sure that the systems were lined up for battery charge. I felt like finally I'm adding some value. But the first watch station officially was EOW. So I qualified as EOW. And I remember my captain, it's funny because I write about it in my book. My second book is that, he gets on the 1MC and he says, I would just want to make an announcement that Ensign Rennie is now qualified as engineering officer of the watch. He is standing watch right now. Mr. Rennie, take care of my plant. And just as soon as he said that, somebody tripped the reactor and we had a complete reactor scram and I had to recover from a reactor scram. And that's just the way things were, And, but EI was my first, qual station. And, to me, it was always about trying to get qualified in the engine room, but my main goal was to be OOD. I always wanted to be, that's why I joined the Navy, was to drive submarines. I wanted to be up front. I wanted to be officer of the deck. And eventually that's where I moved to quickly. So.
And your Dolphins qualification, how does that work for officers? Is it, like I said, is it similar to ours, or is it, do you feel like
shoot. It's the same thing, but it's just, it's the whole boat, stem to stern. And the other thing is, you had to try to figure out, like, who do I go for to get signatures, right? I mean, you guys went through that as well, right? So there's some guys that are just, they're just assholes. I mean, so you got to go through that. And some guys were tough, but those are the ones I actually liked. I liked the ones that were tough and they would ask you tough questions because they make you do some research. And I always liked that. But yeah, we had to go. I mean, so I was getting signatures from, third class petty officers, that were qualified. So, it didn't matter my rank. I had to go get qualified just like anybody else. So, yeah.
Do you do a board at the end of that like we do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we did. And I write about in the book that it was touch and go there, but I got through. So
that was I tell you, you talk about leadership and post Navy career stuff. The Navy qualification boards were absolutely the best. To me, they were the best training for what I went on to. I relished doing interviews, I'll go on job interviews just to go on job interviews because I'd be crazy like that. But I so enjoy that give and take that I learned on the boards.
It's pretty wild. It's definitely different. So and then going through, like I got my went through the engineer's exam as well. And I'll tell you what, that's the toughest thing I ever did in my life was go back to Washington and you do a day of written tests and a day of oral tests to get qualified as engineer. And even though I was getting out, I was like, I'm like, there's no way I'm walking off, walking out of the Navy without getting engineer qualified. So that was the hardest thing I ever did. It's funny when they told me I was qualified, they were like, you passed, you're now an engineer. And I literally, this is after, serving for 5 years. I went and had to get engineer qualified. I literally went across from NR, Naval Reactors, and went over to, there was the hotel I was staying at, and I went right to the bar and I just started drinking. I didn't know how to, I had sucked in so much information for 6 months and I spit it all out, for 2 days. Then when they told me I passed, I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to get drunk. I'm going to the bar and I'm drinking bourbon.
Throwing down.
I had my fire control supervisor board, Battle Station Missile Fire Control Supervisor. And as soon as I was done, we pulled into Hawaii for my 21st birthday.
Oh, wow.
So I had a similar experience along those lines. So you're qualified submarines, you're qualified EL, but you really wanted to be an OOD.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What was it about that OOD position that just drew you in? Because I got to be honest with you, I have the same feeling about that position. That is the position in the Navy. That's where you want to be.
So So my two grandfathers were in World War II. One was Navy, one was Army. My Navy grandfather, in fact, that's on here is a silhouette of his ship he was on. He was on the USS Frost destroyer escort. Was involved in the Battle of the Atlantic. One night sank 2 German U-boats in the middle of a massive winter storm. Which I write about in my second book. But both my grandfathers were my heroes, and that's why I wanted to serve. But I was really, for whatever reason, I was drawn to these stories of the World War II submarine crews and all these daring missions they went on, especially in the Pacific. And for whatever reason, I was like, I'm doing that. I was in junior high school, 7th grade. I said, I want to be a submarine officer. I want to drive submarines. I want to, the Cold War was on, there was this cat and mouse game going on with the Soviets. And I'm like, and then Reagan came into power and I'm like, I got to go do this. I got to do this. This is what I want to do. This is my life's mission. So yeah, it was something early on in my life I wanted to do, probably motivated by my grandparents and my grandfathers. And, so, it's funny because it's not often that a childhood dream comes true, but it did for me. And I got a chance to drive boats, and it was the best experience of my life.
So the first time you said that, this is Mr. Rennie, I have the deck and the con.
Yeah.
What goes through your, is it similar to that moment where you're walking down the boat and you realize I'm not really qualified to do this? Or do you approach it now with a much more different level of confidence?
I had more confidence. By the time I got OOD qualified, I'd been on board long enough. I'd stood so many JOD watches that I felt really comfortable. Plus, the other thing is this is the one thing that is so important about the submarine force people may not realize is that you're surrounded by super competent people everywhere. Like everyone on all my watch standards were so competent, and they knew what they were doing. And I just felt secure, that I knew that if I made a mistake, they would back me up. Right. And I was humble enough to listen if I did make a mistake. So, I had a lot of confidence once that. Now, where I didn't have confidence was maneuvering watch OOD. That took a while to build my confidence level where, we were in Kings Bay, Georgia, which is a narrow channel, lots of, currents and it's just.
Yeah, there's no room for error there.
It's
It's like 10, 20 feet in some of those turns, I bet. You gotta be like
sucked.
right on it.
Yeah, and people don't realize too, like maneuvering a submarine is difficult because you have round hull, you've got one propeller, and you've got one rudder, and it sucks. I mean, you've got to be running at high speed to be accurate. And so as soon as you slow down, you start losing steerage away. And so you got to go fast, and you got to be smart about your turns. And it took a little while to build that confidence. And it was funny because I remember the time when it finally slowed down for me. Like, like they talk about a quarterback, like the game slows down after a while. I remember on the watch where I was taking the boat out to sea, and it just slowed down to me. Everything made sense, and I was calling the commands right. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I finally get it. And so it took a little while. That took a while to get good at that. That's difficult to do. And the stakes are really high. You hit a buoy, it's over, right? You run aground, it's over, right? For the captain and me. So yeah, so it's it's high stakes. But I'll tell you what, I ended up becoming like the maneuvering watch OOD. I was like the guy that they always picked for every maneuvering watch. So because I loved it, and I love being on the bridge, on the surface. I mean, I just absolutely love that. So.
It never made sense why they build Kings Bay Navy Base where it is, with that. So how many turns it is getting back in there? You come in through Florida through was it Fernandina Beach?
Yeah, Fernandina Beach, the sea buoy. Then you come in.
Who knows how many turns you snake back and through in there? But
it's you look gold. If you Google it and you look at you say to yourself, "There's no way you should make a submarine base there." But I think
it doesn't make sense. I know why it got built there. I got told the story when I got stationed down on O2 because it was actually supposed to be built north of NASA, where it's a place called Playa Linda Beach, because that would have been easy access.
Yes.
But Jimmy Carter was president at the time.
Exactly.
Yep. Submarine sailor. He goes, "We're going to build that. Can we build it in Georgia?" Well, that's where we're going to build. We're going to build it in Georgia.
Yeah. Everyone said no, and he said, "We're going to still do it anyway."
Yeah.
You guys, you Atlantic Fleet sailors and your wussy rivers, try going through the Hood Canal Bridge once or twice.
Oh, I heard stories you could dive like right at the pier.
You could dive right.
You could, yeah,
right at the dock.
You could
submerge a ship. Gone.
We had 25 feet we were dealing with, and it was all mud.
I got a good story too about the Tennessee, because that was actually the first Trident I saw up close, and we pulled into Cape Canaveral on the Grant. That was '89. It was same time when they did the first launch of the D5.
The famous circular missile. Huh?
But I remember getting a good look at the Tennessee to try, because I used to watch them being built out there at EB, but never got up close. But I said the same thing to you. I said, "Wow, that's a big boat."
It was a big boat.
It made the Grant look like a guppy, sit behind it. It's a big difference.
Well, to me, I think that the mission of the SSGNs, the ones that have been converted over to the GNs, to me, that's the mission I wish I had the opportunity to do. There wasn't any Ohio classes set up for GNs. But man, what a role that is. I've interviewed some GN sailors on my podcast, and one of the first female officers was on my podcast. But the GN missions seem amazing. They seem like a lot of fun. So you get that big boat, right? But then you're doing some really cool.
Really sounds like you should have been a weaponeer officer, because that's not really a path now, but it used to be back.
It used to be.
Yeah.
That's the only problem with the way it is set up is you got to be a nuke and you got to stay a nuke. And if you really want to get command, you have to go do an engineer's tour. And I really didn't want to be an engineer. I really to me, it was a means to an end.
Drive boats and shoot torpedoes.
That's what I want to do. Yeah, exactly.
World War II. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's always this constant back and forth between fast boat sailors and missile boat sailors. And I was just like saying, look, I had no choice in the matter. I got orders to the Tennessee. Did I want to be a fast attack sailor? I did, but it didn't work out that way. And I got to be on the Tennessee, the first Trident on the East Coast, first one with the Trident 2D5 missile. I got to do some really cool stuff, but I made 7 patrols. So I spent some time under the water. So yeah.
Same thing here. I mean, I wanted to be a sonar tech for the same kind of reasons. I wanted to be on the pointy end of the stick.
Right.
But the Navy said, "Hey, we need you to be a fire controlman or strategic weapons system." So anyway, through my career, and there were occasions where you would watch people in leadership. And one of the more interesting things that happened along the way was there would be times where chief petty officers would pull us aside in a small group, and they would say, that's an example of how to do leadership, or that's a bad example of leadership. Mm-hmm. How does that work for you? I mean, when you're watching people do leadership in the Navy, particularly, how did you start judging them? And is that kind of the genesis of where you end up later on in life?
Yeah, it really is. I remember, through ROTC, we had to take 2 Navy courses every year as we went through regular college. But they took to give us a lot of leadership courses, which is something they don't teach in college today. But we learned a lot of leadership. We read a lot of leadership books. We talked a lot about leadership going through ROTC. And I remember one time we had an 06 actually was our ROTC commander. So we had a captain, a surface captain as our ROTC commander. But I remember him saying one time, he said, you want to learn from every leader that you work from, good or bad. So you want to emulate those good behaviors, and you want to make note of all those bad things, and you never want to repeat them. And I think that's stuck with me for some reason. And so, I would have, you go through a patrol, and there's certain people that are just like, okay, I can't stand this guy, right? But I would just like mentally remember, okay, why do I hate this guy, right? And what are the reasons that I don't like working for him? And I just sort of record those things in my mind and like, okay, I'm not going to do that ever again, right? I'm not going to ever do that in my leadership style. So I think to me, it was always like a culmination of all these different leaders I worked for and just sort of picking up the good and the bad,
Even the bad sometimes. The final senior chief I had in the Navy, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but when he retired, I went to the retirement party, and everybody knew that we hated each other. And 3 sheets to the wind, I walk in, and everybody's like, Bowman's here? Why is Bowman here? And he walks over, puts his arm around me, and says, I know why he's here. Make sure I'm leaving. I learned a lot of things I used to say about him, and I'm not going to tell everybody his name because it's not fair, but I'll never be like that. I'll never do those things.
Yeah.
And what I discovered 5-6 years later, when I'm a CEO and a CFO of nonprofit corporations, all of a sudden things are making sense to me. Yeah. And I'm seeing why he does things. And what I'm discovering is that I may not have liked him, but he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And he got more out of me and the rest of my compatriots than I would have ever gotten out of us because of management styles. And I'm still fascinated by it. It's still on my bucket list to call him someday. He lives in Virginia Beach.
I think that's really important because I think I always say this, like leaders make ripples, and you can make positive ripples and negative ripples, obviously, and you don't realize the impact you make over everybody that that works for you over a career. But, my first captain, was an 06. He was tough on us. He was mean. He would poke you in the chest. He would kick you in the back of the head when we were on the surface. And he'd be up on the flying bridge and you'd be in the, the lower bridge. He'd kick you in the back of the head. I mean, he'd walk around the ship with a stick and knock anything that was rigged for sea. He smashed coffee cups. I mean, he's just a mean guy. But the other thing is he could fight that boat. Like he knew so much. And I learned so much from him. He was tough on me, but I really loved him. And he liked me too, because he could tell. I just was like, all right, teach me the ways, I need to learn this stuff. So he was really tough on us. And my second captain, he was more, I don't know, like laid back and he was more like, like really good on paper. He's probably a guy that was going to go to admiral, whereas my first captain definitely wasn't going to be an admiral. He was a salty sailor that needed to be at sea. He needed to be commanding a boat. And if we ever gotten into a shooting war, I'd want to be with that first commanding officer because he knew how to fight that boat. And I learned how to fight that boat. My second captain, I just didn't, it wasn't the same. He wasn't the same. He was a good man, but he just wasn't hardcore like that first CEO was.
Well, what did you learn from him? What did you take from him?
The second one or the first one?
The second one.
The second one was, here's how to play nice with the people above you to manage a long-term career, which I never really learned that. In my whole career, I never really learned that. So I've never played nice with upper management.
That's kind of funny though when you learn when you get into leadership, people wanting to go up, they got to learn how to do the politics, and that's just something. I've always been a first level leader, first level supervisor. I want to be with the people type thing, because politics just never been my thing. And when I've applied for like manager positions, and I kind of figure that's why I get turned down, because this is how we get it done. You go in and just nail it, but you got to be nice with people. And it's kind of like what you were talking about with that one. I had several LDOs on submarines and on the Canopus that were just, they just really hit hard, like you were talking like that. And I was at a level in my career I could respect it, and I actually liked it and learned from it. And that's kind of how my leadership was more bonded to them, instead of like you were talking was your second captain where they're playing nice.
Same here.
That's not me.
Same here. I've always been that way. In fact, my career, I moved up quite a bit in corporate America and ended up running, multiple manufacturing plants. But at one point I had like 600 people working for me, and I hated it. I ran a lot. I've run 9 manufacturing plants in my career, but the most fun I've ever had is a manufacturing plant with like 140 people. Well, think about it. Why do you think I like that? Well, it's like a submarine crew, right? I mean, right. I love that size group. Once you get into, multiple plants and a lot of people, I didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't have those personal connections, like I have my own company now, and it's a small company, but I know all my employees. I know their names. I know their wives. I know their birthdays. I know what makes them tick. And to me, that's the kind of leadership job I like to have, where I get to know people and,
all right, let's
have a relationship with them. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of that. Let's talk about, you did 7 patrols.
Yeah.
You loved being an officer of the deck.
Yes.
And in some ways I say this, I should have stayed in. I made a mistake getting out. Why get out? Why walk away from that?
Well, I never met a senior, petty officer, senior enlisted, or a senior officer who hadn't been divorced at least once. So that was probably a big reason. So everybody was, I saw one of my junior officer buddies, his wife had a baby while we were off the coast somewhere. We had just gotten one of these giant bag cell phones, and he got a chance to talk to his wife after his baby was born. But I didn't want to have my babies born while I was out at sea. And I just, I wanted to raise a family. And then I looked at the reserves, and, for a submarine officer, the reserves, there's nothing for you really. So, it just, I just said, well, maybe it's just time for me I had to go and start a family, that sort of thing. So for me, it was, and the thing is, like, you got to understand, my first duty station, USS Tennessee, brand new boat, 7 patrols in 4 years. So my life was going to sea, right? So I just assumed that's was going to be my life. I realize now that many people didn't have that kind of a situation, right? They go, they wouldn't make that many patrols. They'd have some time in the shipyards and things like that. So I guess my mindset was like, I can't just keep making patrols. I got to have a family at some point.
Did you have a plan other than having a family? I mean, did you?
I had no plan. I had no plan. So when you achieve your dreams, at 20 something years old, 26 years old, what do you do next? That was a weird thing. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. It took me a while to figure it out. Once I figured out it was manufacturing and running manufacturing businesses, then my life became important again. But that was longer than that now. It was about 8 years out of the Navy where I finally figured out my mission in life after the Navy. It took me a long time. I really struggled. So, yeah.
So you didn't get married young, really, because it sounds like you were single when you got out, or close to being single when you got out?
No, I was married. I was married in 91. I got out in 94. So 3 years we were making.
Yeah. So I could see how that would change.
Yeah.
Your mind. Yeah. And the divorce rate is atrocious. I mean,
it was terrible. People, you guys know, you come back from.
I know.
and there's like wives with their boyfriend waiting on the pier, and it was like 4 to 5 divorces every patrol. I'm like, this is nuts, Mm-hmm. So yeah, one of my buddies, he was an officer on the boat. His wife left him for a woman. I mean, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Think about
crazy.
That would be a tough thing on the psyche,
it's definitely not a place for marriages. Unfortunately, Submarine is just not, a long term. I mean, if you do stay in 20 years, you're on a second or third marriage by the time you
yeah. And I kind of like the woman I married. I mean, we're married 30 years now.
That one's good, right? Yeah, we're good, right?
So, it was
How
worth
does
it.
that lead to a career as I call you a management guru. You can kind of correct that title if you want. How does being in this manufacturing, what caused you to say, I know enough now about management and I'm confident enough about this that I should put pen to paper or keyboard to screen? What's that process like? And how do you just roll out of bed one morning and go, I'm going to write a leadership book?
No, not at all. I've been writing for about 10 years on the subject of leadership. And I think it's because, I spent 22 years in corporate after the Navy. And I think at some point I realized, look, I think differently than every other manager in these companies I work for. And then I realized the reason I do think differently is because of my time on the boats. My time in the Navy really, kind of gave me a firm foundation of how to deal with people and how to deal with tough issues. Nothing was ever as difficult as the Navy. I found work life to be easy. Like people come to me with these problems and they look at me like they're really concerned. I'm like, this is nothing. This is not the reactor is shut down. You need to restore it. This is nothing. This is not taking the boat to periscope depth in the middle of a winter storm, with this high sea state. This is easy. So, about 10 years ago, I realized that, wow, there's some certain things I learned in the Navy that really made me a capable manager in corporate. So I started writing, blog posts, wrote for a couple of different, websites. And then, I just decided at one point, I'm like, why don't I put this into a book? And, I started working on, the second book, actually, all in the same boat. I worked on that for several years. And then, I decided to do a smaller book to learn the process, which is The Eye of the Watch. That's a smaller book. And I wrote that one, as a way to sort of figure out how the process of writing a book and what it's like to publish a book. And man, I had so much fun with that first book that I quickly got the second book out. And, it was really neat. Along the way, I met so many great people, so many other military authors, leadership authors. So it was a fun, exciting process. And, you really don't realize how far these books go, but the first book, probably now we're in the 10,000 copies we've sold, and it's like all over the place. Like this is crazy. I had the XO of the Tennessee call me. This was probably a year ago. He's like, "Oh, I'm Commander whoever from the XO on the Tennessee." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah, we've got your book. Do you mind if I use it to train the officers on the boat?" And I'm like, hell yeah, let's go. This is crazy, I had another call from a lady who's the training coordinator for the FBI, and she said, "I just want to let you know that we have your book in the library at the FBI in Washington." I'm like, what? So it was really wild because you don't realize how far a book goes. So it was kind of a cool experience that book and how far it went, and it's got me. I've been involved with speaking. I've been doing a lot of speaking and training and teaching, and it's really opened doors for me. So it's been fun. It's been a fun process.
What's the magical? I was just going to ask you. It seems like there's something magical about being in submarines when you go into corporate America. Because I've been in corporate America quite a while now, too, a good 20 years. But it's like a different conversation than most leaders have. So like on the boat, everybody counts, and you want to get that non-qual qualified as soon as possible, and you care about the people that you're leading. So I've always taken that approach in corporate, and I've always advanced people's careers. And a lot of times I've advanced people's careers where they've surpassed what I've done, which is fine, and I'm okay with that. But it seems like a lot of leaders out there, or a lot of people that are potential leaders, they don't see it that way. They get caught up with the politics of going way up in corporate America, getting power instead of caring about people and leading people. Because listening to your podcast, it seems like that's we want to talk about that, your Deep Leadership podcast. It seems like a reoccurring theme I hear over and over with all the great guests that you have on that podcast.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. It's about helping people. I mean, I talk a lot about leadership being a people business, and think about the boats are really the great story. I mean, everybody was valuable on the boats, right? So it didn't matter what your rank was. You were critical to that mission. And so if the most junior sailor turns the wrong valve, you're going to the bottom. Think about the TDU, right? Who do we have operating the TDU? It's a hole in the bottom of the boat that we have the most junior sailor operating, right?
Sometimes a senior non-qual with a couple other non-quals.
True. But it's a hole in the bottom of the submarine, right? Yeah. And we give this assignment to very junior people. And that just says, and so what I noticed in corporate is that a lot of senior managers didn't have any respect for the people on the shop floor, the people doing the work, the people answering the phones with customers. And I'm like, you guys are idiots. These people are valuable. And if we don't have them, we don't achieve our mission. So that's been a lot of what I do, is that, kind of making sure that everybody understands what their role is in achieving the mission. So, I always say that leadership is about the mission and the people. And we always forget about and the people. And so that's the one area where I try to focus my work.
I have one more thing that I want to bring up. I mean, how do you think corporate leaders get into the position where they're treating people like they're part of the machinery? They're part of the cog, if you will. They don't look at them as people anymore. And, when it's time to cut the budget, of course, they're the first thing to go. They're expendable. How do people that haven't been on a submarine, how do you think they get into that thinking mindset?
So it comes down to accounting. It sounds kind of funny, but the way we treat people if you look at your P&L, your income statement, we actually put personnel expense as an expense on the P&L. So what does it mean? So the more people you have and the higher you pay them, the less profit you make. So you take your margins and you minus your personnel expense, and then you have your profit. So these short-term managers are thinking, well, I know how to increase my profit. I'm going to reduce the salaries of my employees or hire the cheapest people I can. I'm going to, and I'm going to keep as few people as possible, and then I'll maximize my profit. So that's the mindset they have. And so my mindset's differently. It's the idea that, so if you think about it, in accounting terms, an asset is something that brings future value to a company, right? And the way I look at people is, people are truly an asset. You think about the value that one employee will bring to a company over 10 years or 20 years. It's millions of dollars, right? So let's not be talking about the $55,000 salary you pay this person. Think about the $1 million benefit, or, millions of dollars of benefits you gain from those people. So it's a mindset problem that these people have. They look at a balance sheet. They're like, oh, if I could just not pay overtime, or if I can cut back on my overtime, or if I can reduce the number of people and make, I get Joe to work extra, I can make more profit. And the thing is, you're going to make a lot more profit if you take care of your people. And it's proven time and time again in the business I've run. Take care of the people, they take care of the business. I mean, it's really simple, but it's not intuitive for people who are just looking at the numbers.
It's one of the hardest things I had to deal with in the nonprofit world is telling people, sure, we can fire people and get rid of people, but then who's going to do what's generating income? I mean,
exactly.
Somebody's got to do that. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know. Radio has run into that in recent years as well. One of the things I really enjoy in the almost 20 years I've been doing this is when I interview authors, I for the next probably 6 months, you're going to get random texts from me as I wander around places, and I say, oh, look, there's John's book. Take a picture of it and send it to him. Cool. And tell him where I sit. Where's the weirdest, what's been the most surprising place that you've found somebody reading your book or seen your book on the shelves there?
Well, probably the weirdest one was the FBI. That was a weird phone call. I've seen it overseas. I've seen people in Thailand sitting on a beach reading my book and sending me a picture. I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. So when I launched the first book, I think I put it on Twitter or something like, hey, send me a picture of your book. And I was like, wow, all these people had the book on their back porch or in their living room. And you're like, holy cow, like all these pictures of my book in all these different places. And, it's neat. I think there's magic in, putting words to paper, publishing a book. it's something that I didn't really expect I would ever do someday, but I'm really glad I did it because, it's just I've met so many amazing people through the process, and I don't know how many people I've impacted, but I'm hopeful that I've impacted more people than if I just, wrote those articles and stuff on websites and things. I think the book has a greater impact. And the other thing I would say is that smaller books are better. The first book I wrote was about 160 pages. Second book is more like 300 pages. And I think people really like a smaller book that they can get through quickly. So I think going forward, my books will all be, less than 200 pages because I think we have shorter attention spans now. So, yeah.
I really enjoy that podcast, by the way. I'm listening to it in the office, and I turn it up because there's other managers next to my office. My office kind of hold me, but I turn it up, and I'm always trying to play because you, like I said, it's a reoccurring theme. I'm like, it's not hard. It's magic. You love your people. You train them. And you do right by them. The magic happens. It's a miracle.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it was weird in the corporate world. I got a lot of accolades. My businesses always did better than the other businesses. A lot of my peers hated me because they're like, oh, Rennie, he's always, they used to call me the golden child. Every business I took over went really well. And I kept saying, well, it's not me, it's the people. And I just figured out how to, talk to the people and figure out where the problems are. And they fixed it. I literally just, I empowered them to fix it. And so I kept trying to tell people it's not me, it's the people, but you've got to get the people fired up. You've got to give them authority. You've got to give them responsibility. You've got to show them how important they are to the mission. But my peers were like, well, that sounds like work. What's the secret? I'm like, there's no secret. I'm telling you what the secret is. But they thought I was special. I was the golden child. I got my first manufacturing plant at 32 years old. I was the youngest plant manager in that plant's history. And that plant was around 40 years. And I show up at 32 years old, never run a manufacturing plant before. But guess what? I was back on the boat. I was the reactor controls officer again. Here I am, older employees, more experienced than I am. How am I going to lead this team? It was like being back on the boat again. It was simple. It was the same thing I learned on the Tennessee. Just do this at a manufacturing plant. So, those lessons are really powerful. Being on the boats is regardless of your position, you've got some really good education and training that's going to carry you through your whole life. I believe.
I've certainly found that to be true. So let's talk briefly about your podcast. You do the podcast. The title of it is Deep Leadership.
Yes.
It's got a interest. I like your logo, by the way. Your logo is really, really well done. Tell us about, number one, what it's about, where the people can find it, and what do you enjoy about that?
Yeah, it's Deep Leadership. You can find it on every podcast platform, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it. We're everywhere.
You're on Spotify?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we haven't been kicked off yet.
But we got a competitor. We got to cut this off. He's competing with us.
Well, it's apparently Milli Vanilli is going to pull some people's music off if I don't remove myself from Spotify or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but no, we're all over the place. But so I've been running it for 2 years now. And the reason I started a podcast is that people aren't reading articles anymore. I used to write 1,000-word articles and nobody was reading them anymore. It's what I noticed over time, that we're busy and people are got lots of stuff to do. So I went to an audio format. I'm not an audio person. I bought a microphone. I figured out what it would took to start a podcast. And like, Joe Rogan, if you ever listen to any of Joe Rogan's early podcasts, they kind of sucked. And I kind of sucked in the beginning and just sort of had to figure it out. But now, it's really grown. My last guest last week was, Ken Blanchard, who's, written 65 books on leadership and management. He's one of my heroes. I got a chance to interview him last week. A week before that was, Ryan, Ramsey, who was the commanding officer of the British submarine.
I like that podcast. Matter of fact, he's causing a lot of things while his Twitter pictures online and everybody's like, who is this guy?
Yeah. So he's an amazing guy, really. And he led the commanding officers course called Perisher in the UK after he commanded the Turbulent. And then, this week coming up, I've got somebody who's running for U.S. Senate out of the state of North Carolina, who is a a combat veteran who I knew. She's an author as well. She helped me when I was writing my first book. She's a friend of mine, and she's running for Senate. I'm like, well, I got to talk to you. You know, I've never talked to anyone who's running for Senate before. So I've met some really cool people. I've got a chance to interview some pretty amazing people on the podcast. So it's been fun. Deep leadership. It's leaders, entrepreneurs, military leaders, veterans, all sorts of different folks. So,
what's the future hold for you?
Well, you know, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a manufacturing business. I've been running that for 6 years. We're trying to grow that into a world-class, the next great company in our industry. So we're working to grow that. And then, at some point, maybe, I'm 54 years old. Maybe I'll sell that business and, write more books, maybe go to the island somewhere and drink beer and write books. I don't know.
All right. So I ask all submarine writers this because I get asked this question all the time. Dave, why haven't you written a book? The reason I haven't written a book is because 4 knots to nowhere, with the exception of 6 hours on one night.
Yes.
It's just dull. Do you ever get that itch to write submarine fiction and create some crazy scenario where, rogue agents are going to take over the submarine and it's up to you, your hero, which is really you, to save the universe?
Yeah, not so much me. I'd like to. I've got fancy an idea of writing a story about my grandfather, maybe a fictional version of his life, which was just some. He was a third-class petty officer, machinist mate on the destroyer escort USS Frost in the middle of a massive, World War II and going up against U-boats and just incredible. His boat, if you look it up, USS Frost is known as the U-boat killer, and just to be on the other side, he was above the ocean battling submarines. I was below, and just there's some interesting things there. So yeah, I'd like to tell his story a bit because he was just a super humble guy, and I learned so much from him. And so I think that maybe somewhere I'll write about that. So yeah, there it is, the U-boat killer. Yeah, that's a great book, by the way. Yeah.
Is that sort of like that movie, Enemy Below? Where it had you had the surface destroyer that was going after that. That was a good movie. I mean, I'm sure that was based off of something similar.
Yeah, it's based off.
I didn't see that one, but I imagine it is. But that book that you just showed, that USS Frost U-boat killer, that was written by crew members that were on the Frost in World War II, and you can't hardly find. I found a copy in the UK. I was able to give it to my father for Christmas one year, and it's pretty amazing. You read the stories, and you're like, holy cow! Like I always think like we had it rough. They had it really rough. So a tin can and a winter storm in the North Atlantic is not a good place to be.
I am constantly amazed by Hollywood's inability to come up with original ideas for anything. They just keep rebooting the same things. And I know why they do it, but there are so many of these stories that can be told that are so awe-inspiring. And the Frost, of course, is one of them. And if you don't know anything about it, look it up, USS Frost. And it's, I look at it as there are stories to be told. It's one of my favorite lines from Beowulf. He has a story to tell.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you're telling your stories. I love the fact that you're going forward, but you still, you maintain your past. You understand where you've been, because that really kind of teaches you where you're going. And that's
now, Dave, I mean, we do have a kind of conundrum for our Fast Attack listeners. So now we have another boomer sailor. They're going to be another boomer sailor and probably turn this off like 10 minutes in.
Did you see all the whining? Did you see all the whining from the Fast Attack guys on the Facebook page? We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/group/the And I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. Was it Wyoming did a command change at sea? They did a turnover at sea.
Yeah. That was a good story. Yeah.
And you'd think the Fast Attack guys were like, well, what's the big deal about that? I mean,
do it all the time.
We do it all the time. It's like, yeah, I don't ever recall. And one of the comments that was made was, we had it. It's broke. It's yours now. I don't ever recall Blue Crew ever turning anything over to us devastatingly broke without telling us. I don't know that anybody would ever do that. I I'm sure somebody will have a story about it.
I got a good story, and that's going to take a whole podcast, by the way. Hey, John, yeah, we'll have to talk about that one next time. John, I mean, do you think your career might have been different if you would have been a fast attack officer versus a boomer?
Probably so. But I'm not. It wasn't my dream to be a boomer sailor, but I'm really proud of what I did. You know, I mean, we got to see the end of the Cold War. You know, and I got to be on the first Trident boat on the East Coast. I got to do some pretty cool things. That we had the first one with a Trident 2D5 missile. We got to do some. You know, I got a chance to shoot those missiles. I mean, I spent time in the Caribbean doing torpedo shoots and did some cool stuff. But I probably wish I would have got a fast attack boat just because of what my dreams were. But no, I love what I did. I had a blast and really met some amazing people, and it's really set a good foundation for the rest of my career. So no regrets. No regrets. I one regret. SSGN, man, that I wish I was an Ohio class SSGN. There wasn't anything like that back in the day, but
7 tomahawks per tube.
I know. Come on, let's go. You know, that's what I want to do.
You're like, who wants to party?
I'm willing to get requalified to go do that.
Yeah, you go back to sea, right?
I would do it. I do it in a heartbeat. So
John Rennie is a former Navy officer. He's now a leadership writer and podcaster. And tell everybody where they can find not just your books, but your podcast and your blogs, which, you know, blogs are kind of, they're so 2000s now. Like you said, the podcast
that's funny, but that's how we all started.
Right, exactly. So it's JonSRennie.com. Everything is there. And all my links to social, podcast, all that fun stuff is on there. My books are on there, and you can reach out to me there. There's a contact page as well, but everything's at JonSRennie.com.
Now, for those of you that are listening and not watching, that's JON, not JOHN. So,
but if you spell it JOHN, you get there too.
Do you now?
Absolutely. That's a little trick there. You need to learn.
Figure that out, because I've got the same kind of thing going on with mine.
That's why I don't even spell it out. I said JonSRennie.com. You'll get there. So,
what's your best advice? Your best last advice, Lieutenant? We want to hear some inspiration for a couple of weaponeer second class petty officers that love doing this. We love talking submarines. And
when they commission a boat, what do they say? They say, man our ship and bring her to life, right? So a crew brings a submarine to life. People bring our business to life. That's the most important thing you have to learn about leadership.
John Rennie, glad to have you here. Thanks for being a part of it. We look forward to talking to you again in the future at some point. I'm sure we'll swap some more stories along the way.
Absolutely. This has been a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you being on there, John. Thanks.
Eric, set condition 2SQ, secure from battle stations missile.
All right, I'm going to go get the inverters out. Oh, I probably shouldn't say something like that. No, you can have, we can start to get to the end of the show anyways. I don't even know where I'm at. My dog's barking again and distracting me. No, you can find me at eric@thesubvet.com. We also have this awesome Facebook page. You can come on there and you can join the Subvet group on Facebook /group/the Subvet. Anybody can join. We've discussed the rules on that before. You can find me on Twitter. Twitter's its own little animal, by the way. That's interesting. It's just a different set of rules and guys on there. But I post stuff on Twitter, and I get a lot of great photos off of Twitter too. So you can find me on there as well. And it's Eric@thesubvet.com. I was going to say the Sub Report because I keep thinking John in his blogging days, because that's how I started off with the Sub Report blog way back in 2005.
And you can get me at DolphinDave@slipperyfish.com, or you can check my other stuff out online at thedavebowmanshow.com. I'll get you there. Good to see everybody. Thank you for all being here, and we will see you next time for
the Subvet.